Hello you mongoloids, I was given a video as an argument. This video is from 2017, but I will still respond to it as it appears to still be in use as an argument.
So-called anarcho-capitalists are not anarchists, even a little bit?
And I disagree. I hope we can keep this civil, and I mean no hard feelings toward you. But I am going to have to respond to the argument you made. Allow me to state my biases before we continue. I hold to anarcho-capitalist thought with influence from anarcho-pacifism and Christian anarchism as described by the likes of Leo Tolstoy. Both anarcho-pacifism and Christian anarchism, I will admit, tend towards the side of anarcho-communist thought to an extent, but I cannot justify my belief in individual liberty with communism. As with every video I do, please comment below if you feel I have made an error, whether it is in my thought process or in my interpretation of what is provided within Thought Slime's video. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Let me be really clear here. I'm not offering that as a criticism of ANCAPs necessarily.
Well, that's obvious, at least to me. A look into semantics isn't a criticism of something, it is simply an attempt to accurately define what one is looking at. To do such a thing as defining terms, you have to look at it through different relevant lenses, including populist, intercultural, and subcultural lenses, as terms can change between these. How one uses a term in one group may not be the same as how it's used in another, and the populist usage of a term tends to be more of a layman's terminology. And even within groups there can be disagreement as to the specifics of certain terminology.
Burritos, corgis, Steve Buscemi. None of these things are necessarily anarchist in nature, but they're all universally beloved. Not everything needs to be anarchist all the time. That's okay.
I fully agree. Although, admittedly, I know very little of Steve Buscemi, only seeing 5 movies he was in.
I do think ANCAPs should be criticized, and I think their ideology is whack as all hell.
That's okay. We're all entitled to our wrong opinions.
But that is not the focus of this video. I'm just here to explain why they're not anarchists, that's all.
And I am here to explain how that's only true if you look at anarchism through a singularly narrow lens, which you do, and how that lens gets murky as all hell.
Along the way, I might make fun of them a little bit, because it's hard for me to talk about this toilet ideology without showing my contempt for it.
I will attempt to be as much of a comedic genius as you are, good sir. Fourth word to hilarity.
Part 1. What do these words mean? Anarchism is a spectrum of ideologies that are opposed to unjustified hierarchies.
See how he said, unjustified hierarchies? Keep that in mind. We'll need it later.
Be they political, social, economic, or any other axis of oppression that people invent. The term was coined to describe oneself politically by Pierre-Joseph Proudhon.
Yes, it came into existence in the mid-1500s during the French Revolution but never was used to describe oneself until Proudhon came to coin the term in the 1800s. The original term came into English in the mid-1600s as anarchisme, from Greek anarchia meaning without a ruler. Proudhon influenced even anti-government capitalists. And even I will praise him with a lot of what he said. While I do not entirely agree with him, nor would I even agree with applying some of his quotes to every situation, I do have respect for him as a philosophical thinker. He's had scathing words to say on things such as public utilities, such as to be governed as, under pretext of public utility and in the name of the general interest, to be laid under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, extorted from, exhausted, hoaxed and robbed, then, upon the slightest resistance, at the first word of complaint, to be repressed, fined, vilified, annoyed, hunted down, pulled about, beaten, disarmed, bound, imprisoned, shot, judged, condemned, banished, sacrificed, sold, betrayed, and, to crown all, ridiculed, derided, outraged, dishonored. Unlike a lot of people who seem to praise Proudhon, he seemed rather individualist in a lot of his writings. He wasn't a capitalist, mind you, especially since the term capitalist at the time wasn't in reference to an ideology but a kind of person, that being a rich business owner, but he wasn't communist either. He's what's called a mutualist, sort of a middle ground between capitalism and communism. But even the mutualism he's known for is different than the more prevalent mutualist view espoused by Kevin Carson. His definition of what an anarchist is was rather simple: no masters. Property is theft, and property is freedom. If you have the time, read his book What is Property? No matter the political aisle you are on, it's a fair read of early formal anarchist thought. Even his other works are good to read. Some of his words even resonate with the pacifist in me, such as in his letter to Marx, in which he said, "I believe we have no need of coup de main in order to succeed, and that consequently we should not put forward revolutionary action as a means of social reform, because that pretended means would simply be an appeal to force, to arbitrariness, in brief, a contradiction." This is mirrored in Trip York's writing in Living on Hope While Living in Babylon, The Christian Anarchists of the 20th Century, in which he said, "Christian anarchism is not a revolutionary politic, for it denies the legitimacy of revolution. This is a call for something far more subversive than the replacing of one regime with another. Regime change has been the model of worldly power since its inception. Christian anarchism rejects the very presuppositions that make the idea of revolution, and, perhaps, even liberation itself, intelligible. Jesus is neither exemplified in Che Guevara or Simon the Zealot. He had no desire to destroy or replace the kingdoms that surrounded him with a different ruler. Instead, he established a community of believers who developed and reside in the altera civitas on earth, the church. But I'm rambling at this point. Let's continue."
An, meaning without, archos, meaning rulers, and y, meaning make the word sound cooler. Capitalism is an economic system typified by these three things. 1. Private control of the means of production. That's a hierarchy. 2. Free exchange of goods and services on the market. 3. Wage labor. That's also a hierarchy.
Yes, these are hierarchies. Now it's on you to explain how they are unjust hierarchies.
It sucks.
I thought I had it all together.
Anarcho-capitalism is the belief that the state should be dismantled, but capitalism should somehow be maintained, which they think would work.
Yes, the maintenance of capitalism requires a market to remain free. Intervention from the government is antithetical of this. Restrictions of what people are allowed to do with their own property or labor is antithetical of this. For capitalism to be maintained, all that is required is to leave the market to its own devices.
They believe everyone should follow the non-aggression principle, which basically means you shouldn't initiate or threaten to initiate violence against someone or their property.
Basically, yes. It's a social agreement that would be ideal to follow, although not everyone will follow it. Anyone who would believe otherwise are utopianist at best.
Part 2. How are these things related? ANCAPs and real, actual anarchists believe that the state is illegitimate and should be dismantled. Though they share this conclusion, they both arrived at it from very different reasoning, and those differences make their goals mutually exclusive.
All anarchists have different ways of arriving to this conclusion that the state is the enemy of the people. All anarchists have different beliefs on how to achieve an anarchist society. One might call me a pessimistic anarchist, as I cannot see how one could achieve an anarchist society in this world, at least any long-term anarchist society. But any step closer is better than nothing at all.
Anarchists believe the state is illegitimate because it's a hierarchy that does not meet the burden of proof required to justify its existence. They don't like, for example, how states are always doing genocides and bowing to the needs of a slim minority of rich perverts at the expense of everyone else.
Not just the rich, but any minority, including the outrage mob of people with high social credit that we've seen have reach and influence. While this is beating a dead horse, Anita Sarkeesian is an example here. More recently, Case Holiday is an example. Their influence was different and to varying degrees. But yes, the government is illegitimate because it is, as you stated, an unjust hierarchy. It forces the will of the minority or the majority upon the rest. Whether they are pushing through the will of the minority or majority, they are forcing their will upon the other. This is an act of aggression against the rights of the other.
Anarchist praxis tends to revolve around taking shit from rich perverts and giving it to people who need it.
That's really only in revolutionary anarchism. It's seen as a contradiction of anarchism by non-revolutionary anarchists.
Fighting systems designed to prevent oppressed folk from being in control of their own lives, and violating the non-aggression principle all over a Nazi's face.
Well, really anyone who would wish to control others. But I get what you were there.
ANCAPs believe the state is illegitimate because it interferes with the operation of the market.
That's only a portion of it. Economic freedom is an extension of individual freedom. If we stopped at this point, we would be no different than libertarian minarchists. But the social aspect is an important aspect. We take what the libertarian minarchists believe and follow the line down to its logical root and conclusion, that any force against the individual is the antithesis of a belief in individual freedom. So anarcho-capitalists see interference with the market as a symptom of a bigger problem, the interference of the individual.
The state prevents Adam Smith's invisible hand from guiding us all to laissez-faire heaven, as it would definitely do if the state just got out of the way.
You're dishonestly presenting us as utopian. The market isn't an invisible hand. It's not even a force, it's the collection of voluntary transactions. The market is upheld by the people initiating in trade. This will inevitably lead to less than perfect outcomes as man is imperfect, but as long as scarcity exists, such a system is the best way to deal with this issue.
Even though the state is necessary for capitalism to function.
I would like to hear how it is necessary. As far as I can see, it is the biggest impediment to economic freedom.
Also, they believe the taxation is theft, and boy, do they want to tell you about it.
Is it wrong? It's become a meme among ANCAP circles, I admit, and it's definitely thrown out more than it should in situations where taxation wasn't even brought up, which obfuscates what anarcho-capitalism is, but it is still the truth.
Their praxis tends to revolve around protecting property rights and making absolutely sure that people who own shit get to keep it, even if that mad sucks for everybody else.
And have you looked into what constitutes property? The short answer is labor. Nothing can be owned that was not first worked. One cannot claim any land that has not been worked. One cannot lay claim to what someone else has created without them voluntarily giving up claim, whether after, during, or before the labor is put into creating the product. To deny the product of labor is to deny the rights of labor itself. I will link to a video I did on this specific topic below.
You own the only well in town? Well, sucks for all those thirsty chumps. That's your property, and you earned it fair and square by inheriting it from someone else who built it and maintained it with the help of all the people you now prohibit from using it.
You own that well. You don't own the right to stop someone else from building a well. An underground river isn't owned by anyone. The well that draws the water from that river is. But nothing is stopping someone from building their own well.
ANCAPs believe that all rights derive from property rights. The reason you have a right to autonomy over your own body is because you own yourself, and you're allowed to do whatever you want with yourself, even sell yourself.
Well, some put property rights first. Others, like me, put ownership of the self as the most basic right, from which all rights, including property rights, derive from. You own yourself, and because you own yourself, you own the product of your labor. This gives you the right to do what you want with that product, and even with yourself. Which,
I guess if you sold yourself, the money that you get wouldn't belong to you anymore, because you don't belong to you.
If you sell your body, you still own yourself. You have simply promised time and labor in exchange for something else. You still own yourself.
Following from this position, their reasoning is that if property rights are not protected, no human rights are possible. So, while we may share a disdain for the government, anarchist and ANCAP ideologies are not compatible.
You hyper-focus on a singular anarcho-capitalist thought, when anarcho-capitalism isn't a singular ideology but an umbrella of different ideologies, ranging from agorist to Hoppian and so forth. If you wanted to be fair, you would look at all anarcho-capitalist thoughts. It would be like me looking at Marxists as representative of all communists and communist thought, which would be dishonest at best, as Marx is not Engels, is not Mao, is not Stalin.
Part 3. But what if they're the real anarchists and you're fake anarchists pretending to be anarchists, but they're the real ones? Remember Proudhon, the first person to call themselves an anarchist? He was rather fond of the saying, property is theft.
Yes. He also said, property is freedom, and we want property, but property restored to its proper limits, that is to say, free distribution of the products of labor. Property minus usury, as well as property, is impossible. Make of this what you will.
Anarchists tend to agree, because allowing property to be owned privately inevitably results in the accumulation of property by the few at the expense of the many.
I've been given the line of property itself not being an issue, that personal property is completely fine. But personal property is property that is privately owned, meaning it's owned by the individual rather than collectively or publicly. It's that person's property. I'm not going to attribute this to you, as you have not brought it up in this video so far. If Proudhon were to be believed in saying, property is impossible, then even personal property is impossible. Nothing at all can be owned. If we were to stop at property is theft, then even personal property is theft. You cannot own anything at all without stealing from another. Then there's property is freedom, which means being able to own personal property is a sign of freedom. All of these can't be true at the same time. If property is impossible, then it cannot be stolen, and if either of these are true, then it cannot show freedom of the people. So, which is it?
That's an economic hierarchy, my dude. Hierarchies have rulers. You can't subscribe to without rulersism if you want rulers.
Hierarchies don't necessarily have rulers. Rulers can be at the top of a hierarchy, but simply leaders or someone who is better at what is needed to be done can be at the top of a hierarchy. Hierarchies exist throughout all parts of life, and in all groups there is a hierarchy. If you have someone that is seen as a leader and others follow, which every movement has such people, you have a hierarchy. This goes back to what you originally said in this video. An unjust hierarchy isn't the same as a voluntary hierarchy or a natural hierarchy. You began this video defining anarchism as an opposition to unjust hierarchies, and I completely agree with that definition. The only things left to discuss would be what constitutes an unjust hierarchy, how do we achieve the end goal, and how should society be set up after the achievement of a stateless society. I'm not so far up myself as to say that any disagreement with what constitutes an unjust hierarchy determines who is a real Scotsman, anarchist.
Even if you think those rulers deserve to rule, you're still a ruler, you ding-a-ling.
And rulers, defined as a person exercising dominion over others, are illegitimate if not everyone under their dominion is fine with their rulership. This is the issue with rulers, and anarcho-capitalists are in agreement. You can never have a society be in full agreement like that.
ANCAPs are quick to assure us that in the absence of the state, all agreements would be made between voluntary free actors for some reason.
There will be people that break the non-aggression principle. That's a given. No society is perfect. But isn't your own criticism here easily able to be applied to anarcho-communism? In a communist world, you'd have to trust that your fellow man won't go against the communist ideal. So if I present a situation in which a group of people attempts to superimpose their will upon others, what would your answer as to how a communist society would solve this issue be? I have a feeling it would be very similar to what anarcho-capitalists would say: enact defensive aggression against the offenders.
So while it's a hierarchy, it's not coercive, like it is when the government wants you to vaccinate your children. Except, like, if the alternative to accepting an exploitative agreement is starvation, as has been the case for most people whenever unregulated capitalism rears its ugly head, that's, a little coercive. Maybe, not all that materially distinguishable from state violence.
There's an issue with this reasoning. By now, everyone's seen this comic, and while it's an absurd parody, it really does highlight the problem such an argument presents. If working for your daily bread is exploitative and violent, then nature itself is an oppressive force. What would you do if no one on a commune wants to work the fields with you? Are you simply going to let those people starve? Are you going to slave all day to feed them? Or will you force them to work the fields with you? It's simply a fact that yes, if you want food, you have to work for it.
Also, vaccinate your kids, guys. You're gonna get smallpox. And I don't agree with what you say, but I will defend to my death, you're right. not to get smallpox.
Smallpox is bad. Vaccinate your kids, people. To private schools require all able children be vaccinated in order for them to be allowed to be students at your institution.
Part 4. You, sir, are biased.
We all are. That's why I make it a point to state my biases at the beginning of my videos.
Yes, that's true. I don't much care for ANCAPism, and I do very much like anarchism, and I want to kiss Peter Kropotkin in that beautiful broom face of his.
Ha! Gay!
So let's hear it from Murray Rothbard. Oh God, did I say that? Murray Rothbard is the libertarian economist who you might recognize from those Six Flags commercials.
Huh, you're right, they do look rather similar.
The dude who pretty much invented anarcho-capitalism.
Debatable. Some would argue it really started much earlier, but was only formalized by Rothbard.
Once said, "We are not anarchists, and that those who call us anarchists are not on firm etymological ground, and are being completely unhistorical."
A bit of a dishonest cherry picking there, lad. What was meant by that phrase, which he published under the pseudonym Aubrey Herbert, was that libertarians aren't anarchists in the traditional sense. Even calling the anarchist groups of his time irrational collectivists. He wanted to dissociate from that, placing anarcho-capitalism on its own field.
So, there it is. I agree with Murray Rothbard on something, I guess. That's pretty gross.
Here's another Rothbard quote, then. Capitalism is the fullest expression of anarchism, and anarchism is the fullest expression of capitalism. Not only are they compatible, but you can't really have one without the other. True anarchism will be capitalism, and true capitalism will be anarchism.
Part 5. I'm not any kind of anarchist. Why should I care about any of this? Why'd you click on the video? I think it's fair to say I have some misgivings about ANCAPism.
I think it may be more than simply misgivings.
But my objection to them being called anarchists is not simply because I disagree with them or I don't like them. It's because their ideology is not that thing. They're more like turn-of-the-century liberals than anarchists, which is probably why they stole the word libertarian. Because it sounds kind of liberally, and liberal was taken. Well, I mean, I guess libertarian was taken too by anarchists, but who cares about anarchists? You can take anarchist words, nobody minds.
The first usage of the word libertarian can be traced to William Belsham in 1789, and not long after it became commonly defined as one who advocated for liberty, being used to describe French revolutionaries in 1796 in the London Packet. What the word came to be associated with split over time and took two roots. The first being from the usage of Sébastien Faure in Le Libertaire, from which it became known in Europe is synonymous with the anarchism of the likes of Proudhon around the turn of the century. The second being as a synonym of classical liberalism in the U.S. beginning in the mid-1900s, not from Rothbard but from Dean Russell. Today it is widely used as an umbrella term to encompass many small government beliefs from the left to the right, where the extreme of libertarianism is anarchism, which is colloquially defined as an opposition to the state's existence in its entirety. This is one thing that I never see brought up. The layman has that definition and has no idea about this entire ideological battle going on over the term, and as far as I could tell, one side could absolutely win the battle with the others conceding, and the way the layman uses the term will have pretty much stayed the same.
Probably part of the reason ANCAPs want to co-opt the term is to get into anarchist spaces and drown us out. Our beliefs present a threat to theirs, or I guess they would if anyone took our beliefs seriously, and I find that a little galling.
I call myself an anarchist because that's what I am. I'm not trying to invade anarcho-communist circles. I just want to be left to choose my path in life without the red tape of the state. You go do your own thing and let me do mine.
I don't like the idea that groups who don't like my ideas are trying to make them more difficult to talk about or conceive of by changing the meaning of words to suit their agenda.
We haven't been trying to change the word. You already gave a base definition. We simply disagree with the conclusion you come to based on that definition. Allow me to remind everyone of the definition here presented. Anarchism is a spectrum of ideologies that are opposed to unjustified hierarchies. Throughout this entire video, it has yet to be shown how a business is an unjustified hierarchy. He simply continues on as though this is an already commonly held belief. But what constitutes an unjust hierarchy is the entire crux of the divide amongst anarchist thoughts, of which I am unconvinced anarcho-capitalism isn't a part of, because there is no agreement of what an unjustified hierarchy is, nor was even a base definition even provided within the video.
It'd be Orwellian if it was being done by the state or by smart people, but it's actually being done by supplement-chugging Econ 101 anime avatars, so it's just kind of irritating.
Ad hominem. You can do better than that.
Also, by the way, you can't have capitalism without the state, because without the state and police and the military, there's no way to protect private property from the collective force of the working class. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the state currently exists only to serve the interests of capitalism.
Any answer you give as to how a commune would protect personal property or their hometown is the same answer as can be used by anarcho-capitalists.
Hey, I got a little worked up, and I'm sorry about that. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please hit like and subscribe. There's another video about political correctness that you can watch. That was the other video I did. You can watch that one.
Sorry, TS. Can I call you TS? I'ma call you TS, sorry, but I'm going to have to turn down this tempting offer, as I'm sure you would to my offer. I do hope you watch this video and can civilly respond to me, one way or another. But anyways, my lovely subscribers, I do hope you, and even you TS, if you've made it this far, have a wonderful day or night. And remember,
this is an escalator.